Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Bright News discussion. My name is Shannon Braswell, and today I'm joined by Shane Kennedy.
Hello, everyone.
So how you doing, man?
Doing great. What about yourself, Shannon?
I'm doing all right. It's a little warm here, so I'm trying to weather the storm. We don't have air conditioning, so.
Oh, that's brutal.
Yeah.
Well, it's about 100 degrees right now as the crow flies in Florida, but I've got the AC blasting, so
Wow.
So it's not too bad.
You're much more comfortable than I am, but that's good. But yeah, man, I want to start out our conversation by talking about this article by LifeSite News, which details the situation going on right now with Father Jesus Mary. Father Jesus Mary was told, this is coming from LifeSite News, on this year, 2022, that was told that all appeals have been rejected and that his only possibility is now to appeal to Pope Francis.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read a short excerpt from here. On February 2nd, Father Jesus Mary Misigbero was informed that his spiritual family, Opus Dei, expelled him for publicly criticizing Pope Francis for his support of same-sex civil unions. The 42-year-old African priest has posted on Twitter and Facebook several statements contradicting the Pope's gestures and words towards normalizing and accepting homosexual civil unions. By February 25th, Father Jesus Mary was told that all appeals have been rejected and that his only possibility is now to appeal to Pope Francis. He is now excluded from any priestly ministries. So I want to know, just from that excerpt, what do you think is really going on here? And then maybe I'll share my thoughts after that.
Well, just at the surface level, it seems like Father Jesus Mary is criticizing the Vatican in general for its not acceptance, but it's become pretty cozy with the alarming trends that are kind of starting to reign in the West, you know?
Right.
And this is, and I think Father Jesus Mary, I think the thing he did was he made himself a little bit too much of a visible critic to what the Vatican is doing. Right.
And do you think that this is, for me, my personal opinion is one, I would say that, I listened to his statement on the LifeSite News YouTube channel.
Yes.
And one of his statements, which I think is really profound, even if it's not coming from a spiritual place, right? It's coming from like a cultural and political one. And that is, in Africa, the vast majority of, religious people, follow, Islam or Christianity, right?
Yep.
And the one thing that I would say is that, and this is, I think, a statement that, he made, which is when you're talking about the church, you're talking about a church which also shares, geopolitical, relationship with the Muslim world, right?
Yes.
The Muslim world is not very keen on homosexual marriage, right? And neither are most of the people that live in Africa who are Christian. So I think for on that note, it's sending the wrong message to non-Catholics, to non-Christians, that the Catholic Church is somehow aiding and abetting in a homosexual lifestyle, right? And that can send the wrong message in terms of a relationship that Christians and Muslims have in the region. It can turn into something like, well, see, Christians they definitely don't practice what they preach. They don't believe in the word of God. They don't believe in the teachings of the church.
Yeah.
And so, it just further, I think it further exacerbates the tension that is already there amongst believers. So that would be my first take, on that issue. What do you think of it?
And so I kind of I can kind of see it from both sides. I do want to say I don't believe that this was I don't believe that the Vatican is stepping properly in doing this, but I think in many ways it's very unfortunate that the Holy Father has decided to surround himself with and seek the counsel of so many cardinals that he kind of keeps in his inner circle. For example, like Cardinal Burke, it would kind of, for all intents and purposes, is kind of on the outer circle of the Holy Father,
Right.
And then cardinals like Supich and Marks and people like that, and Father Gregory, who tend to be a little bit more okay with putting a Catholic stamp of approval, maybe not necessarily on homosexual marriage, but on civil unions and keeping and this is the thing, at least in my mind, it's all ambiguous. And I think a lot of this, I think there has been a very ambiguous position taken by the Vatican really over the last like half century, and it's been getting more and more and more ambiguous. That then you have priests like this father that's stepping out to try to protect his flock, and saying no, I disagree with this. This is wrong, and it's not. And he wasn't coming out and criticizing the Holy Father in a spirit of schism or in a spirit of anger. He was doing it in a spirit of love. And in fact, I listened to the interview. I just listened to it again this afternoon that the father gave to LifeSite News, and he said that what he would love to do is meet with Pope Francis or directly correspond with Pope Francis, so that he can set the record straight and so that he can share his concerns that he has about the things that Pope Francis has said with Pope Francis himself.
Right. And that you're right. And I think you're absolutely right, that the kind of ambiguity that comes out of the Holy See is sort of, it just leaves a lot of questions open. And, people don't really know how to address this. Right. Especially when you're coming from a place that has, traditional values. I mean, that is just like sort of, I think, a known fact when it comes to places like, countries in Africa, Asia, South America. And, with the Pope's address to, a number of different communities around the world, speaking about, the genocides that have gone on, the colonialism, things of that nature. I would say that, aren't you sort of reviving sort of that colonialism by trying to change, what has been passed down for generations to these communities, right? You're telling them basically that everything that they were taught from the outset about Catholicism, regardless of where they are, right, whether it be in Europe, Africa, or United States, you're telling them that the teachings of the church are really open, up for grabs, or it's in the air, right? It doesn't really have a set in stone message. And I think for me, I would say that, especially when you're talking about people that are just coming into the church, that are just, that have been converted, they don't need that kind of confusion, right? Because, they are trying to get into a place in their lives where they are more committed to their faith, more committed to their spirituality. And when you don't take clear stances on these things, especially as being a spiritual leader, I think um, that you're sending the message that, well, who do we go to? Who can we go to for leadership, right? Because that is one of the mainstays of the church, which is to look to the Holy Father to give us guidance. And so for me, I just think that it's counterintuitive, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And especially for someone who is a priest of a church that is probably, I won't say, I'm not going to say isolated, but that is probably not well known,
right.
Versus the church that's, say, here in the United States, to silence him, and then to have this hierarchy, with in place that silences him and doesn't want to give him the chance to actually speak. I think that's very disheartening, man. Again, it sets the tone that, those who love the church, those who want to be a part of the church, whether they've been members of Catholic Church for generations or whether they're newcomers, it just sends the wrong message,
Yeah, and just kind of thinking about what you said before about colonialism, that made me think of something that this is almost this like colonialism, but this is a clerical colonialism in a way,
right?
And intervention. And the thing is that is this type of this non-schismatic criticism, it should be welcome, because the thing that, this is the type of thing that really refines the faith, and this is the type of thing, in response to it, would elicit a very specific response, reiterating this is the stance of the church, and this is and if this is a misconception, this is not the stance of the church, and being very clear, and then that way there really isn't any wiggle room as far as for priests, bishops, cardinals, or laity for that matter, to criticize the position of the Holy See, because it would be clear.
Right. And here's another thing, Shane, I want to say, is that I think attached to that is a lot of people feel that, if you criticize the Pope, then basically you're criticizing, the church. If you say, well, if I say something against the Holy Father, then of course I'm going to be seen as basically being pushed out of the church. I forget the word that they use, but you're anathemized or something like that, right?
Yeah, you've essentially excommunicated yourself by
by speaking up against falsehoods, right? And that is a very that's something I struggle with too, right? I'm not going to say I'm outside of that group. I think I struggle with that too, because you don't know whether to say, well, okay, I don't agree with that because it's not church teaching, but at the same time, I don't want to speak out publicly against, the successor to, Peter. But I think there's room here, and you had alluded to this the last time we talked, whereby we can see the person who is sitting in the seat of Peter, right? As sort of you had said something about like seeing him as more of a prime minister, right? Or as a maybe you can unpack that.
Yeah. Well, really, the thing is that we can't. I think something that's very easy for us to do in our day and age, and especially with the influence of the Protestant evangelical point of view, which in many ways, there is a lot that Catholics can learn from the evangelical movement, particularly to be more into the Word of God,
Right.
But I think there's this partition between looking back at the Old Testament as if it is this like phase one, and then everything that occurred in the New Testament is kind of phase two, and they look at things as like a duality, but truly the Catholic and Orthodox point of view, and really the early church point of view, is that it's really one continuous tradition. Right. And so when you go back and you look at the the kingdom of Judah, excuse me, the kingdom of Judah, the king had a queen mother.
Right.
But most importantly, the king had 12 ministers, and the 12 ministers were kind of what the apostles were the fulfillment of. And you had good ministers and you had bad ministers,
Right.
but you had one prime minister that was given the keys to the kingdom.
Right.
And that's what was fulfilled in at least we believe, in giving Peter the keys to the kingdom. And something to note, I was reading the Gospels this morning,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of dawned on me that Peter denied Christ three times.
Right.
And in fact, Jesus turned to Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan."
Yes.
The thing is that in fact, I think I think G.K. Chesterton said something along the lines of that Peter Jesus selecting Peter as the rock upon, as the rock to build his church upon. He picked a very human.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
And the thing is, and most popes, overwhelmingly, most popes have been excellent. Right. But there have been a handful of popes that have not been excellent. In fact, that have been bad.
Right.
And I think that there is a point where we have to separate, and we have to say that the Pope is like, we would liken the Pope to being like the earthly prime minister of the kingdom.
Right.
And that we will have bad prime ministers sometimes.
Right. And when you, yeah.
And that in no way is that's not a reflection upon our upon the faith deposit that's being guarded by the church.
Right. And I think that, you make a good point when you talk about Peter, right? I mean, even after, Christ had died and was resurrected, there was even, debates within the church, in its earliest councils, right, about being a Jew and a Gentile and things like that, right? And mm-hmm. There's talk of circumcision and, and not being circumcised. Were you really a, Christian if you weren't circumcised, or were you really following the law and things like that, right? And, I can't remember exactly, who sort of came up against him in this regard. I believe it was Paul,
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Right. So, making these statements that, circumcision, non-circumcision does not make you a Christian. It's circumcision of the heart. Right. And, I'm just thinking with that, just because, the Holy Father has a very high position within the church. I mean, the highest position within the church besides, Christ and the Blessed Mother, right? Mm-hmm. I don't believe that means that we can't say anything against what it is that he is doing or the lack thereof, right? Because right. A lot of this seems to be, like you said, it's ambiguous. So it means, to me, that's saying there's a lot that he's not saying, right? And because there's a lot of things that he's not saying, or that he's not making definitive statements about, it leaves a lot of people within the church questioning, where the church is going to go from here. And I would also say that has a great influence on a lot of other Christian denominations, right? Particularly here in the West, because a lot of times, I think what the Catholic Church does or doesn't do, has a ripple effect as a reaction, or, whatever, based upon what the Catholic Church does. I, from my part, I think that and we had touched on this a while ago, is that, the church in Africa seems to be doing a way better job at upholding the teachings of the church than we do here in the West. Right.
Well, in fact, I think I told you that I'd be perfectly content if somebody made a rule that the next pope must come from Africa.
Right. Right. And it's just, as you think about that, what does that say? Maybe it speaks to the fact that there may be a real, maybe that's real reconciliation, real, a real turnaround. Right. It's like,
yes,
you brought the teachings to us. Now we're teaching you again what you brought here. You were, yeah.
Well, and it seems like, and that's the thing for us to remember is that among other things, the church is there to protect the faith deposit, and the thing is,
right.
The Vatican has a wonderful collection of material representations of our faith deposit in the Vatican. That's why they have all the, the art and all the relics and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But the thing is that that in the African church where they're actually facing up against Islam, and they're not facing up against their culture isn't dying. Their culture is very vibrant, and there's a spiritual competition going on there. They're protecting the faith deposit there, and for them, if they don't protect the faith deposit, then they'll get out competed.
Right, exactly. And and the question is like, what does that say about the West? Right, what does that say about the United States and Western Europe? Right, where are we do you think we're already kind of outcompeted by secularism, or have we already lost this battle?
I think that we are in a period right now where secularism definitely reigns on the throne of the West, right. And particularly liberalism and modernism, which both of those are terms that get thrown around a lot, especially among Catholics to attack one another, but
right.
but the thing is, if you look at the kind of the social order in the West, you can look at it in our politics in America, and Europe is looking more and more and more like America politically, very divided, very pluralistic.
Yes.
And everyone is squabbling and battling over stuff, and you no longer have this transcendent set of morals that kind of comes down from the high heavenly throne, right. That the Jesus Christ reigns from. Now in the West, we have foolishly adopted this idea that man's reason is not only enough, but things should never go beyond man's reason.
Right.
And
right.
that has led us down a very, very erroneous path. And that's one of the reasons I have so much respect for Pope Leo XIII and Pope Pius X, which in invoking those two names, I think we also have to be very careful to not follow them to the point that we become schismatic or
right.
or commit the sin of pride.
Right. And yeah.
Oh, and here just one last thing, and this is something that I was reading about yesterday in depth, is the heresy of Donatism.
Okay.
Which I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. I wasn't familiar with it until yesterday, but
not.
Okay, well, the heresy of Donatism, it was something. It was put down like in 311 at a council, and it came out of North Africa. And essentially, what it said was that if somebody was not, or if someone in the clergy was not sanctified,
mm-hmm. then any
sacraments that they administered would automatically be invalidated.
Okay.
And
I think I know what you're talking about. Now this
yes.
comes sort of around the around the late antiquity, right? And
Yes.
I think
Yes.
Saint Augustine was arguing with this in Carthage, right? Like
Yes.
some of
Yeah.
the,
And
yes,
that's
okay,
particularly the region it was.
okay,
It was Carthage and Alexandria.
right,
And it was a huge thing. But I think something we have to be very careful of in the church, as easy as it is for us to feel, is in spite of a member of the clergy, no matter where they fall in the hierarchy,
mm-hmm,
them having views that we see as being erroneous, even things that were condemned by previous popes, and
right,
even things that we view as being morally reprehensible, views that they're espousing. The important thing is that they are following the proper rubrics
right,
for the sacrament, in administering the sacraments. And the only reason I say that is to kind of circle back to Father Jesus Mary,
right,
because he was criticizing the Holy Father. He was criticizing things that he had said from the Holy See, and these were not things that Pope Francis was saying. These were not things that he was saying with binding authority ex cathedra.
right,
He was stating things as the Pope, but he was not saying these things in a binding way. But Father Jesus Mary was not accusing him of. Father Jesus Mary was not committing the heresy of Donatism, which is one accusation that some people have made against him.
okay, okay. And do you think? My first question would be: do you think that is because he's an African living in Africa, and this has something, and you're talking about Donatism coming, having a popularity in, say, North Africa?
That's something I hadn't actually thought of that until now. That that's really interesting. That may be because a heresy that arises from your particular region. I would imagine that there would be a local, quite a local memory of that particular heresy.
Right.
Maybe that's a reason, or the thing is he's a very. He seems to be a very, very well trained, very, very well spoken, and very, very learned member of the clergy. He probably just at the very least he just understands that he's not criticizing the seat of Peter. He's criticizing the things that the occupant has said.
Right.
And he's not criticizing, he's not criticizing binding statements either. And that's
Right.
another thing I think people that needs to be noted as well. And the LifeSite News article is an excellent depiction of what happened.
Right. Right. I mean, he has a degree in a doctorate in philosophy, and
Mm-hmm.
he's been with Opus Dei for nearly 25 years. So
yes.
he's been engaged in this, in this, in the life of priesthood, for quite a long time. And it seems to me that, he would know, just on the grounds, on a grassroots level, what's going on, amongst Catholics in Africa. And, I want to say something, man. I feel like it's one of those things where it's kind of one of those things where, they say, oh, these are first world problems. This question of homosexuality and all this is first world problems that we are kind of laying on the third world.
Right.
And the powers that be, I think, just don't understand that, like, first of all, most people who are Catholics are not even thinking about this as an issue, right? But
right.
you may be opening up the door for something that could be potentially even more doing more harm in countries that already have financial and political and religious tension, right?
Yeah.
That would be, that would be my argument. If the church is supposed to be safeguarding the teachings of Christ, right, and the teachings of the church, then who are the ones that are supposed to be saying that? Well, it is the fathers, it is the the priests, it is the clergy, right? And it's also the laity. I'm not gonna say that we don't have a part in that. I think that it's time that the laity speak up against things that we don't agree with based on the teachings of the church, because we are the ones who receive these messages, coming from the Holy Father, coming from the clergy. Otherwise, who else are they speaking to, right? They're speaking to the body of Christ, and that's why I feel like it's we should support fathers like Jesus Mary, Cardinal Burke, and not shy away from them, because I think they're the ones that are putting their lives out on the line, and they're losing positions within the church. They're being demoted and things of that nature, and they're really taking on a lot when it comes to these issues. So I personally feel like he's doing the Lord's work. He's doing the Lord's work, man.
Well, and I really like the point you made about that. Us as the laity, we have a responsibility to stand up for doctrine, right. To stand up for tradition. And that's kind of an interesting thing about, so I think one of the reasons that there has been so much confusion and ambiguity in the church, both of our lifetimes, mm-hmm. is we're living in the wake of Vatican II. And I think that a lot of people, especially in the very, very trad Catholic community, in the very far extreme, they will point the finger at Vatican II and say it should have never happened. Every problem that we are facing today is a result of Vatican II. And my parish priest is very, very well studied on Vatican II, and he's a very, very conservative Catholic priest.
Okay. Great.
And that's something that he always tells us, us his flock, is that we're living in the wake of a Vatican of a council. And what he said is that as you can go back and look at church history, in the wake, like the century following any council, there's usually a lot of debate and chaos that kind of ensues. Maybe not to the degree that's ensued after Vatican II with the bubble masses and everything, but that we're in a time where there has been a lot of confusion. And one of the things that he has told us as his flock is to go and read the Vatican II documents, right, and not take his word for it. Go and read them and look at what controversial people like Marcel Lefebvre, Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, what they signed up for, because Lefebvre voted for these documents at the council, and there's a discrepancy between bubble masses, mm-hmm. and abandoning Ad Orientem and abandoning the Gregorian chant and abandoning Latin and stuff,
right,
and what these documents actually say. And right. and I think that's the, and when I look at what Father Jesus Mary was saying, he is calling Pope Francis to go back to tradition, and if one of the things that will be said is the spirit of Vatican II, the spirit of Vatican II. Right. Well, what about actually looking at what Vatican II said?
Right.
And that's something because I had fallen into the camp for a little while, thinking, oh, every ill that the church is facing right now, it's because of the Vatican II Council.
Right.
And my priest challenged me and corrected me on that.
Right.
And so the only reason I bring that up is that there has been this. I think it's pretty fair to say there's been ambiguity in the church ever since the fallout from Vatican II, where statues were removed and the churches were were made to appeal, and the hymns and stuff were all created to reflect like the 1960s, you know, and we in the rush, the Paracouncil, who were the people that actually implemented Vatican II, they went far beyond what the expectation was. Vatican II actually says to preserve Latin, whenever you can, to obviously to incorporate more vernacular, as far as maybe reading the text in Latin and then reading it in the vernacular, like what happens in a lot of Latin masses anyway today.
Right.
But also preserving Gregorian chants and all that kind of stuff, and also ad orientem. No, that's one interesting thing. Nowhere in Vatican II documents at all is ad orientem banned, or is ad orientem actually even discouraged.
Right. And just for people who don't who are not aware of what ad orientem means, can you would you mind just giving a brief definition?
Yes.
Okay.
It's where ad orientem, you think of the orientation, and rather so in the Novus Ordo Mass, which is the Mass of Pope Pius the sixth. The priest faces faces the congregation while consecrating the host and during the liturgy of the Mass. In what you can call, I guess, the traditional Mass, or there are Novus Ordo Masses where they're actually said ad orientem.
Right.
To today, actually, they're few and far in between, but the priest faces the crucifix.
Right. And I know, and this is.
Yeah, and the idea isn't that the priest is turning away from the unwashed masses. What the idea is that the priest is like the focal point, like the tip of the pyramid, or the tip of the spear, kind of representing all of us, facing the Lord with reverence.
Right. And I think what is connected to that, is this idea of facing towards the east, right?
Yes.
It's if you're facing towards the east, because Jesus says, look to the east for when you see me, when I'll come back again.
Yes.
So I think it's sort of in recognition of that, right? Because the priest is to turn towards the east when you do the Mass. But this is I think leading us into sort of a good closer here, because just this week we see that DC Cardinal, who is the Archbishop of Washington DC, Cardinal Wilton Gregory, has basically limited the traditional Latin Mass to 3 churches in the DC area. And I think this also, and this is supposed to be something I think that is going to be carried out throughout the Catholic Church by fall. Like, I think the Pope basically gave a message that, like, we're gonna reduce the Latin Mass to very small numbers. And I'm just thinking here, I too also attend a traditional Latin Mass parish, and for me for me, I would say that when I attend Latin Mass, what I am preparing for is to be involved in something that's transcendent, like you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're being taken out of the secular world, right, and being put into a space of the sacred. And I think that secondly here, when we talk about liturgy and we talk about the language, right? Well, it's been said that His Holiness is trying to unify the people, and trying to bring them back together through, this sense of diversity, right? And that, there have become these small waves and small pockets where people who kind of, quote unquote, have extreme views within the church, sort of, I guess, they tend to want to be in the Latin mass, right?
Yes.
My opinion on that is actually the exact opposite, because I think that the liturgy, the Latin mass, is the one thing that unifies all Catholics, right?
Yes.
If you go from here, and I'm just using this as an example, right? If you go from here to a place where they don't speak English, right? Let's just take, I don't know, wherever, France or whatever, Italy, for instance. You don't speak the language. Well, when you go to a Latin mass, it's the one thing that everybody can be on the same page with.
Right.
You learn that, and it becomes almost, like a universal language, right, for people. And no other ancient tradition, they don't, not that I have heard of, they don't suppress their traditional liturgies. They may introduce English into their liturgies, to be more of assistance to people who may not understand the sacred language, but they don't they don't suppress their sacred liturgies. And I think that Catholics should be aware of that. It's like we're the only ones that continue to try to do that. And I don't, maybe we can call it the spirit of the age, but I feel like that's really taking us down a negative road, because that doesn't create unity, right? Like you think about the Tower of Babel, right? Well, what happens? The city is destroyed and everybody's speaking different languages. Well, there is no real structure. There's no ability to create civilization, ability to create anything, right? Well, here with the church, I mean, we've got an opportunity to build on the right foundations, right? On which is Christ, right? And the liturgy is something that I think can help to facilitate that. The Latin liturgy, the traditional mass, is something that helps to facilitate that unity amongst people, and so I don't see where they're getting this idea that it's somehow causing more confusion or more division. I really don't understand that.
Well, and that's the thing. Whenever they say things like, well, we had to change, we had to update it because of Vatican II. We had to ban Latin because of Vatican II. Well, what exactly are you talking about? Where in the conciliar documents does it say that we're going to remove Latin from the mass? It doesn't, or that we're going to replace Gregorian chants with hymns, with hymns in the vernacular. It doesn't say that at all. And the thing is, so something that I would highly recommend anybody who has the opportunity to read, and you can read it for free on the Vatican website, is Sacrosanctum Concilium, which is the Vatican II document that addresses particularly that addresses the liturgy and things.
Right.
And that's the document that addresses Gregorian chants, that addresses the Latin, that would address Ad Orientem and everything. But it's really interesting when you actually get into the documents. It kind of reminds me of people that will say that things are like in America, when people say things are in the Constitution that actually aren't.
Right. Yeah.
And then they try to create some new rule that everybody else has to follow because they're trying to impose some constitutional right on people that doesn't actually exist.
Right.
It's the same exact thing with the Vatican II documents, which are actually for the most part very beautiful, and they encourage the laity to participate more in the church in the way that the laity were more involved in the early church.
Right. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this
But
is good, man. Yeah. Um, I think we're heading in the right direction,
yes, we are.
and I want to keep this up, brother. So, you know, let's keep this going, and I'll continue to do my part with coming up with some articles, and we just keep on going.
Let's do it.
All right, brother. Good talking with you.
You too.